This is the FM Gold channel of All India Radio. In the program News Analysis, now we bring you a discussion on Ujjwala Yojana. The participants are Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Richa Mishra, journalist.
So Taneja, it's a very ripe and successful time for the government, 5 crore. Much before the target of 3 years gets over. Ujjwala, has it brought in the social reforms with which the government wanted to go ahead with?
The way I look at it is, actually I can't find any other word except to call the whole scheme, the whole project revolutionary. People like us living in big cities like Delhi and Bombay can't understand how the life is. Let's say, cook food for the entire family, very often extended family in rural areas or semi-urban areas, and to do all that in the most primitive manner, using whatever source of fuel that you can find, including cow dungs. And suddenly, you bring in this modern fuel in the kitchen. So what happens? It completely changes the landscape of the household. Completely. The culture, the way of thinking, social. The woman of the house feels empowered. So it's not just this. And at the same time, you're bringing in something where this takes care of the health of the lady, in the sense that it's like old saying, like prevention is the best cure, is the best thing. That's in a way are you also preventing. And at the same time, with LPG comes a bit of modernization in the household, starting from the kitchen, and then it goes on to the family and the other things. And then they, of course, start dreaming even bigger in terms of other modern equipments and facilities and so on and so forth. So I think it's revolutionary. And the fact that it has been conceived, executed, and delivered in such a short period of time, hardly 2 years if you look at very carefully, and for such a large number of population, I think it's revolutionary, it's a world record. This shows one thing, that if you really want to achieve something, even something as complex, LPG is extremely complex,
right,
as complex and as difficult as LPG, and making it available to people in far-flung areas, below poverty line, and to distant areas, that is doable. And India can do it. So I think this being watched, by the way, by various governments from across the world, even developed countries have shown interest. They want to know how India has managed to do it. This kind of transformation, this kind of revolution, such a short period of time, changing the life of 5 crore households in such a short period of time. So absolutely revolutionary.
So to talk about urban India is very different than the rural part, and the challenge was to change the habits of the rural India. Now, that's not an easy task, and even the officers on field tell us that it was very difficult to reach out to the women there and tell them. And LPG cooking also requires change in cooking habits. You have to stand and cook, you can't sit and cook. There are other requirements also, certain distance to be maintained. So, to go about that task, petroleum as an industry always seen as a technical thing, to get into the social mode, what do you think would have been the planning behind?
First of all, I would say that our 3 companies, Indian Oil, Bharat Petroleum and Hindustan Petroleum, I think when you look at the way they have gone about the whole thing, executed it, with a small booklet explaining everything to the people, and the people going there and explaining how to use the burner, how to use LPG cylinder, where to keep LPG cylinder, and all those things. And if you really go on the ground today, there have been very, very few accidents. Majority of women, I think they have adopted it very well. So that is the reason, but our companies, these 3 companies have played a very important role. And of course, the people who have been down there and explaining everything, they have played a very big role. And in a way, very silently, they've carried out this transformation. And of course, the biggest role that has been played in the whole thing is played by our women. If they have not done it, if they have not been receptive to the whole thing, or if they have shown some kind of resistance, the story today might have been completely different. But the fact they accepted it, they welcomed it, and they adopted it, they worked hard in order to understand how to operate it, I think is absolutely fantastic.
So there's one very interesting aspect here, that price, affordability is a very key component. And this fuel is not cheap. So government did work out a mechanism. Now, the scheme also has not worked in silo, because had it not been given up, which was given by the people who could afford and savings coming to the oil companies from there, that this has happened. But still, we find in the consumption pattern, it's only 10%, the growth, which doesn't really reflect on the success of the scheme, if we want to say so.
Success of the scheme is basically the idea to make LPG available to them, to connect and in the process educate them. I think on that, 10 out of 10. In terms of whether they have switched completely, in the sense there could be many other reasons, their own economics, household economics and so on and so forth, or in some cases even habit. But the good thing is now they're connected. Over a period of time, they will actually take it 100%. And when you look at the economics also of the whole thing, I think economics is quite workable. Unlike people living in big cities, they probably won't be consuming 8 or 10 cylinders a year. They're probably going to consume much, much less. They are also going to use other fuels, including solar cooker and all that, which is also under work, as you know. So I think the combination of LPG and plus solar is going to completely transform and revolutionize the way they, for instance, cook food in the kitchen across the country, especially the BPL families and so on and so forth. But the overall economics, when you look at it, yes, it was very ambitious on the part of the government. It was very ambitious on the part of the Indian downstream companies, OMCs and all that. Because two reasons for that. Number one, bulk of LPG is imported. LPG is not cheap. Bringing LPG is not cheap. LPG vessels are quite expensive. And then since India started importing more, the prices of LPG internationally have gone up. Today we are actually the second biggest importer of LPG after Japan. So it has its own price. But if you look at the price that, for instance, India has to pay in terms of higher prices of LPG and so on and so forth, but if you compare it with the benefits, any day, I think, left to me, I would do it 100 times every day. Because the benefits that it has brought in terms of opening up a new market for LPG companies, LPG players across the world, international players too and Indian players too, opening up the market, and at the same time taking care of the economics and health. So I think overall benefits are tremendous, especially when it comes to India's women living in rural and semi-urban areas.
We just spoke about LPG price. Now that has again given opposition a fodder to talk about. Again, from 1st August, it has gone up by marginally by a rupee or so for the subsidized one also. So in that context, do you think there's a mechanism which the government can work out, which will ensure that the consumer end doesn't get the pinch while sustaining the subsidy burden which the center also feels?
These are early days. Initially, when natural gas came, natural gas was available for free. Our producer like ONGC, they had nothing to do with the gas, in the sense they were just flooding it. But now, gas is expensive. People are willing to pay any price for gas. I think the story has just begun. We have to allow some time. I personally feel this LPG market, in terms of the people who have been given this subsidy, have been given this access, have been provided this connectivity, in 5 to 7 years from now, you will find they will be able to pay for it. And in about 7 to 8 years from now, these companies will realize actually there is a new market for them, and the economics will be quite actually attractive even for the companies and for the people providing LPG. But at this stage, the way it looked like, and some people, especially those who don't understand these things, especially those who are kind of the chattering classes, the big cities and all that. But we have to look at this way, that here in the process you are opening up a new market, you are empowering these women, not only empowering in terms of their access to it, but also the economics, and at the same time you are making LPG or the clean fuel available to people across the country. There is a solid economics behind it. It may not be visible today. It may look like as the government would have to provide more subsidy, maybe in short term, but I think medium to long term, all stakeholders, including big companies and maybe the government, they are actually going to be on the winning side.
So do you think the time is right now to allow private sector players also into the business?
Well, I personally feel that when it comes to distribution, when it comes to making LPG available, private players should come in. And not only private players, I mean the state government should also come in. I think we should encourage especially those state governments which are financially better off. They take initiatives, set up their own companies, work together maybe to start with 5 years with Indian Oil and HPCL, or maybe they set up joint ventures with them so that they come forward. For example, Uttar Pradesh is a large state home to 22 crore people. Why can't they can set up a joint venture together with Indian Oil for the sake of discussion and set up a new company for LPG only? And the company can import, company can buy its own LPG ships, company can put together its own distribution system, and there can also be competition. I think when it comes to LPG, there should be competition. I personally feel competition between Indian Oil and Bharat Petroleum and plus 20 players who come into the market, including the UP government sets up its own company. I think the time has come for us to open up. Right. Open up in terms of economics, open up in terms of ideas, open in terms of infrastructure of distribution and so forth. What we have done so is fantastic. I think we have basically laid the ground now. But I think when it comes to the 3, 4, 5 years, 7 years from now, it should not be only the government-owned companies. There should be other companies too, and states should also be encouraged to play their own role in terms of by setting up their own company for LPG distribution, and they can come up with their own kind of economic. Maybe some of these people can also be invited to participate in such company. To start with, they can set up joint ventures with HPCL, BPCL, Indian Oil, but then they should, over a period of time, they go entirely on their own. It has to become an open business if you want the economics of it to be more viable.
Another big challenge was to find out who are the true beneficiaries. Data was an issue. Now we have gone beyond, and the numbers which are available, some are not part of that numbers which we are talking about. So how do you overcome that challenge?
The people living in rural areas, people living below poverty line, or people living a life where they encounter poverty every day, they're far more honest on such matters and in such matters than people living in air-conditioned houses in Delhi and Bombay. So I think you just have to look at the smile on the face of these women who are getting LPG connection. You go and interact with them on the ground. I think there might be 1% or 2%, 3% or maximum 5% who probably are trying to cheat or have successfully cheated. But then I think we can live with it. As long as you can see a smile on the face of the 95%, those who are the beneficiary. In a large and complex country like India, if we expect from day one that it should be absolutely 100% perfect, I think it's not possible. But if you look at the implementation, you look at the benefits, look at the smile of the face, look at the fact that people are talking about it. Just read the local newspapers across the country and the feedback that you get. As far as I'm concerned, I think it's hugely successful.
So do you also think it's the right time to get the 5K cylinders pushing in more? It can work as an alternative vis-a-vis 14.5 for the domestic purposes which we have. So do you think the companies can also look at that depending on the demand side?
When it comes to distribution, we need a bit of, change of mindset. We have to go for why even 5 kg. You can be even smaller than 5 kg. And then also we have to bring in new material or including transparent material so that, it can be used. It has already come into the market, but probably even more. And at the same time, we also need to set up a kind of a network in such a way that people have access to LPG cylinder easily. For instance, from the grocery store next to you, or from some other people, individuals or women setting up their own cooperatives for this purpose, or the unemployed youth actually joining forces and joining hands and joining money in order to set up a unit of their own for distribution purposes and so on and so forth. I think we need to recast the pyramid completely. Right now, the pyramid that we have put in place, which is old, which is very government controlled, which is very rigid, I think we need to loosen up it a bit and work for the recast of the entire pyramid. And that will open up job opportunities, distribution will become easy, and whatever subsidy that needs to be given over a period of time, there would be absolutely no need because the market and the consumers, they will take the charge of it completely.
So that's not happening maybe because of fears of corruption and black marketing. Do you agree with that?
I think it's the mindset. There could be two reasons. One is that we think that the government knows the best, or the people running these companies, they know the best, and they are the only one who are equipped to handle it. But I think they're a bit conservative and they're underestimating the people. And when you open a window, first 1 hour you do get all kind of stuff coming into your room. But after 1 hour you get only clean air. Once you have the market only controlling demand and supply, then things actually move into the completely different mode, which means transparency, honesty, and demand and supply fundamentals taking care of everything.
I can't help asking you that this mechanism was completely social reform. Like Swachh Bharat was happening, this is also being cited as one of the social reforms. It was, everyone took it as their own reform instead of just being oil industry or an oil marketing company reform.
Well, I tell you, the approach was very simple. If you look at the history of LPG was basically initiated as a clean fuel, but their idea was also to make it available to maximum number of people, and it was heavily subsidized to start with. And now here we saw that how do we make sure that you can change, call it social reform, call it by any other name, but how can you change the life of these people living below poverty line in those areas? So I think social reform, yes, but then let's not forget one thing. It's the government job to bring about such a reform. And it's also the responsibility of those who are better off economically, socially, culturally, and educationally to look at these people and see what can we do for them. If we have done something, I think each one of us must feel happy about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on Ujjwala Yojana. The participants were Narendra Taneja, energy expert, and Richa Mishra, journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. This program is also available on our website newsonair.nic.in. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsdtalks@gmail.com.